The morning sun was shining on the tall glass windows of the city hospital. People kept entering and leaving through the sliding doors, carrying worried faces and tired steps. The waiting area was full, chairs lined up in rows, and every seat was taken. Mothers held their children close, older men leaned on walking sticks, and a few patients looked weak as they sat quietly, waiting for their turn. In the middle of this crowd sat a man named Daniel. Daniel was a quiet man, known by his friends as someone who never liked to make a scene. He wore a plain shirt and dark trousers. His face was calm, but his eyes showed that he was in pain. Every few minutes he lifted his left hand to rub his shoulder, wincing as the ache grew sharper. He had been living with this shoulder pain for nearly a week. At first he had thought it was just from lifting something heavy at work. He told himself it would go away if he rested. But instead of healing, the pain had only worsened day by day. By the third night he could hardly sleep. Every time he turned, the sharp pull in his shoulder woke him. Even small tasks like pouring a glass of water or buttoning his shirt became a struggle. His wife noticed his struggle and insisted that he visit the hospital. She said that ignoring pain only made it worse and that it was better to be sure than sorry. Daniel finally agreed, and that morning, he had walked into the hospital with hope that a doctor would find the real problem and give him proper care. He sat waiting for more than an hour. During that time, he watched other patients go in and out of the doctor's office. Some came out smiling with medicine in hand, while others looked relieved that their problem had been taken seriously. Daniel felt a little more confident that soon it would be his turn, and he too would be examined carefully. Finally, a nurse stepped out with a clipboard and called his name. Daniel stood up slowly. His shoulder hurt as he moved, but he tried not to show it. He walked into the doctor's office with quiet steps and greeted the man in the white coat sitting behind the desk. The doctor's name was Miller. His white coat was neatly pressed. His stethoscope hung around his neck, and his computer screen glowed with patient files. He looked up for only a second, then went back to typing on his keyboard. Daniel stood waiting, unsure if the doctor wanted him to sit. After a pause, Miller gestured quickly to the chair across the desk without making eye contact. Daniel sat down and began to explain. His voice was steady, but there was clear pain in his tone. He told the doctor that his shoulder had been hurting for several days, that the pain grew stronger each night, and that it was now difficult to do even simple tasks. He asked if the doctor could please check it properly because he feared something serious might be wrong. But Dr. Miller leaned back in his chair and gave a small sigh. Without looking closely at Daniel, he spoke in a dismissive tone. He said that most shoulder pain was nothing but strain, that people often exaggerated when they felt discomfort, and that resting was usually enough. He did not stand up, he did not touch Daniel's shoulder, and he did not ask him to move it to test the pain. Daniel tried again, telling him that the pain was sharp, that it felt deeper than a simple strain, and that he was unable to sleep. He hoped the doctor would listen carefully and at least check his shoulder with a proper examination. But Miller waved his hand as if to brush aside the complaint. He wrote something quickly on a slip of paper and pushed it across the table. It was a prescription for painkillers. Take these, rest for a few days, and you will be fine, the doctor said in a flat voice. He was already turning back to his computer, ready for the next patient. Daniel looked at the paper, then at the doctor. His heart felt heavy. He had seen patients before him being checked carefully, with stethoscopes and tests. Yet his own pain had been dismissed within minutes. Still, he did not argue. He picked up the slip quietly, thanked the doctor in a polite tone, and stood up to leave. As he stepped out of the office and walked back through the waiting hall, Daniel felt uneasy. Something was wrong, and deep inside he knew it. His pain was not ordinary, and his body was telling him the truth. He had a strong sense that there was more behind it than what the doctor believed. He decided he would not let this go. Daniel kept the prescription in his pocket, but his mind was already working on what to do next. He was not the kind of man to speak loudly or argue, but when something was unfair, he believed in standing firm. What he would reveal later about his condition, and the way he was treated, would not only surprise Dr. Miller but also shake the entire hospital and everyone who worked there. Daniel walked out of the hospital doors with slow steps. The sunlight outside was bright, but his heart felt heavy. The prescription paper crumpled slightly in his hand as he thought about what had just happened. He had waited so long in the crowded waiting area, hoping for proper care, but all he received was a short talk and a piece of paper. His shoulder still ached, and it was not the kind of pain that simple tablets could cure. He thought about going straight home, but instead, he sat on a bench near the hospital entrance. Cars came and went, people hurried in and out, but Daniel sat quietly, lost in thought. His wife had told him to trust the doctors, yet he could not ignore the feeling that something important had been missed. He rubbed his shoulder again, and the sharp pain made him close his eyes for a moment. At home, his wife Anna was waiting. She rushed to the door as soon as she saw him. "What did the doctor say?" she asked with hope in her voice. Daniel placed the prescription paper on the table and told her what had happened. He explained how the doctor did not even check his shoulder properly and only gave him painkillers. Anna frowned as she listened. She knew her husband was not the type to complain without reason. If he said the pain was bad, then it truly was. "This is not right," Anna said firmly. "You need someone who will listen." "We cannot let this go," Daniel nodded. He agreed with her. The hospital was large, and there were other doctors working there. He decided that if one doctor would not take him seriously, he would find another. He wanted the truth about his pain, not quick answers. The next morning, Daniel returned to the hospital. His shoulder had become stiffer overnight, and even wearing his shirt was painful. He waited again in the reception line and asked if he could see a different doctor. The nurse at the desk looked at him with surprise, but then agreed and gave him another appointment slip. This time Daniel was sent to Dr. Harris, a younger physician known for being attentive with patients. When Daniel entered the room, he noticed the difference at once. Dr. Harris stood up to greet him, shook his hand warmly, and asked him to sit. He looked directly at Daniel with kind eyes and listened carefully as Daniel explained his shoulder pain. Instead of brushing it aside, Dr. Harris asked several questions. When did the pain start? What kind of work did Daniel do? Was there any swelling or numbness? Daniel answered each question honestly. The doctor then asked him to remove his shirt so he could examine the shoulder. He pressed gently on different areas, asked Daniel to lift his arm in several directions, and watched closely as Daniel winced in pain. "This is not a simple muscle strain," Dr. Harris said thoughtfully. "I believe we need to run some tests. It could be related to the joint or even nerves. I will send you for an X-ray first, and if needed, we will do more." Daniel felt a sense of relief wash over him. For the first time, someone was taking his pain seriously. He went to the radiology department and had the X-ray done. When the results came back, Dr. Harris looked at them with a serious face. "There seems to be something unusual here," he said slowly. "It does not look like a normal injury. I want you to stay calm, but we must check further with an MRI scan to see exactly what is happening inside." Daniel nodded. His heart beat faster, but he stayed quiet. At least now he was on the path to finding answers. Meanwhile, in another part of the hospital, Dr. Miller passed by and saw Daniel walking toward the scanning department. For a brief moment, Miller's brows furrowed. He had dismissed Daniel the day before, assuming nothing was wrong. Now seeing him go for advanced tests made him uncomfortable, though he tried to hide it. The hospital was a place where word spread quickly. Nurses and staff often noticed things, and soon whispers began to move through the corridors. Some staff members had seen how Daniel was rushed out of Miller's office the day before, and now they saw him being treated with seriousness by another doctor. Questions began to rise among them, though no one spoke too loudly. Back in the waiting area, Anna sat beside her husband as they waited for the next step. She held his hand gently and smiled to give him courage. "You did the right thing," she told him. "You did not give up, and now the truth will come out." Daniel looked at her with gratitude. He was tired, his shoulder hurt deeply, but his heart was lighter. He knew the road ahead might be long, but he also knew he was not alone. Whatever the scan revealed, he would face it. And what he discovered in the days ahead would not only change his own life, but also bring a lesson to the hospital that no one would forget. Daniel sat in the long hallway of the scanning department with Anna beside him. The air smelled faintly of medicine and disinfectant, and the quiet hum of machines filled the space. A nurse called his name and guided him inside the MRI room. The large white machine stood in the middle, looking both strange and intimidating. Anna gave his hand a light squeeze before he went inside. "Be strong. This will give us the answers we need," she said softly. Daniel nodded and followed the nurse. Inside, the technician explained the process patiently. Daniel had to lie down on a flat table that slid into the large machine. It would take some time, and he had to stay still while the scan was running. Daniel lay down carefully, his shoulder aching with every movement. The table moved slowly into the tunnel, and soon, loud rhythmic sounds began as the scan started. The minutes felt long, but Daniel kept his eyes closed, reminding himself that this was the step that would bring him closer to the truth. When it was finally over, he sat up with relief, though his body felt stiff. The technician told him the results would be sent to Dr. Harris shortly. Back in the consultation room, Daniel and Anna waited with quiet tension. The door opened, and Dr. Harris entered with the scan images in his hand. His face was serious, but his voice was gentle as he spoke. "I have gone through your scans, Daniel. I need to explain to you what we found." Daniel leaned forward, his heart beating faster. Anna held his hand firmly. Dr. Harris placed the images on the light board and pointed to a dark area near the shoulder joint. "This is not a simple strain. You have a growth inside your shoulder. It is pressing on your nerves, which is why you are feeling such sharp pain. We cannot ignore this. You will need further treatment, possibly even surgery, but we will guide you step by step." For a moment, Daniel felt the room grow silent. A growth inside his body was something he had never imagined. He had come expecting the doctor to say it was a muscle issue, maybe a ligament problem, but this was far more serious. Anna's eyes filled with tears, but she stayed strong, squeezing his hand tighter. Dr. Harris continued calmly. "The good news is that we caught it in time. You came here before it grew worse. If you had ignored this or delayed treatment, it could have caused permanent damage. We will arrange a meeting with the specialist team, and they will decide the best plan for you." Daniel nodded slowly. Though the news was frightening, he felt grateful. Grateful that he had listened to his instincts. Grateful that he had not accepted the careless dismissal of the first doctor. And grateful that someone like Dr. Harris had listened. While all this was happening, whispers had already reached other parts of the hospital. Nurses spoke quietly about how Dr. Miller had sent Daniel away without even examining him. And now it was revealed that the problem was serious. A few staff members shook their heads, disappointed that such an important case had been brushed aside so easily. Some even wondered how many other patients might have suffered the same way. That afternoon, Daniel and Anna sat in the hospital cafeteria with 2 cups of tea. The warm drink gave them some comfort. Anna looked at her husband and said, "I cannot stop thinking about yesterday. What if you had listened to that first doctor and stayed home? What if you had kept taking tablets without knowing the truth?" Daniel looked down at his cup, his voice calm but firm. "If I had listened, this would have grown worse. Maybe by the time they checked, it would have been too late. That is why I cannot let this stay silent. What happened yesterday is not just about me. It shows something bigger. A patient's pain should never be ignored." Anna agreed with him. She knew her husband well. He was not the type to create trouble, but he always believed in standing up when something was unfair. She could see in his eyes that he was preparing himself not only to face treatment, but also to make sure his story was heard. Meanwhile, Dr. Harris had already arranged for Daniel to meet the specialist team in the coming days. He assured Daniel that he would personally follow his case and make sure everything was handled carefully. This kindness gave Daniel courage, but it also highlighted the painful difference between one doctor who dismissed him and another who cared. In the evening, as they returned home, Daniel felt tired but more determined than ever. His shoulder hurt, but his heart carried a new kind of strength. He had discovered the truth, and now he carried a responsibility. What he had been through was not only his story. It was also a lesson for the hospital and for everyone who worked there. And soon, the truth of how he was treated would come to light in a way that would shake the hospital from its roots. The following morning, Daniel woke up early. His shoulder throbbed with pain, but his mind was clear. He had not slept much, yet he felt restless energy pushing him forward. The news from Dr. Harris was still fresh in his thoughts. A growth inside his shoulder was serious, but at least now he knew the truth. The thought of what might have happened if he had accepted the first doctor's careless words sent a chill through him. Anna prepared breakfast quietly. She kept glancing at her husband, trying to read his face. He ate slowly, lost in thought, but then he looked up and smiled gently at her. "We will face this together," he said. Anna nodded, her eyes full of trust. Later that day, they returned to the hospital for the specialist meeting. The hospital corridors felt different this time. Daniel noticed a few staff members whispering as he passed, their eyes following him with curiosity. He did not know that many people had already heard about the contrast between how Dr. Miller had ignored him and how Dr. Harris had discovered the truth. In the specialist's office, 3 doctors sat at a round table, including Dr. Harris. They welcomed Daniel and Anna warmly. One of them, Dr. Lee, spoke clearly. "We studied your scans, Daniel. The growth in your shoulder needs to be removed. It is not safe to leave it. The surgery will help relieve the pressure on your nerves and reduce the pain. After that, you may need some therapy to recover your strength." Daniel listened carefully. His heart was heavy with fear of surgery, but at the same time he felt relieved that there was a clear plan. "How soon will it happen?" he asked quietly. Dr. Lee replied, "We will schedule it within the week. It is best not to wait, but I want you to understand we caught this in time. You came here before it spread further, and that is very important." Anna reached over and held Daniel's hand, giving him silent courage. Daniel nodded firmly. "I will go through it," he said. "Thank you for being honest with me." As they left the office, Anna noticed something unusual. 2 nurses nearby looked at Daniel with expressions that showed both sympathy and guilt. It was as if they already knew how badly he had been treated on the first day. One of them even whispered softly, "I am glad you found the right doctor." Daniel gave her a polite smile but said nothing. That evening at home, Daniel sat with Anna on the porch of their small house. The air was cool and the sound of children playing in the street floated around them. Daniel spoke quietly. "This is bigger than just my pain. I was almost sent home with nothing but tablets. If I had followed that, I might never have known until it was too late. How many others could be suffering like this?" Anna listened carefully. She had known her husband long enough to understand his thoughts. He was not a man who liked to fight or argue, but he believed in truth. She could already see he was preparing himself to share his story beyond just their home. The next day, Daniel returned to the hospital for pre-surgery tests. While waiting in the corridor, he noticed Dr. Miller walking by. Their eyes met for a brief second. Miller looked uncomfortable and quickly turned his gaze away. Daniel remained calm, but he could see that the doctor recognized what had happened. The truth was beginning to catch up with him. Meanwhile, more hospital staff started to talk. They discussed how Dr. Harris had shown care while Miller had dismissed the same patient without examination. Some of the younger nurses whispered about fairness and responsibility, saying a patient's life should never depend on personal attitudes. Inside, Daniel focused on his upcoming surgery. He completed his blood tests, answered questions from the nurses, and signed the required forms. But even as he prepared for the operation, he carried another thought deep in his heart. He wanted to ensure that what had happened to him would not happen to anyone else again. On the evening before his surgery, Daniel sat with Anna once more. The room was quiet and a soft lamp glowed in the corner. "Tomorrow will be difficult," he said softly, "but I am not afraid. I trust the doctors who are helping me now, and once this is over, I want to speak about what happened. People need to know that patients deserve respect and care no matter who they are." Anna placed her hand on his shoulder gently, careful not to touch the painful side. "I will stand with you," she said with steady eyes. "Whatever you decide, you will not face it alone." Daniel smiled faintly. Though the road ahead was uncertain, he felt stronger knowing that his wife believed in him. He was not only fighting for his health but also preparing to stand for something greater. The hospital would soon witness the truth, and the careless mistake that almost cost him everything would no longer remain hidden. And so, as the night passed and the morning of surgery approached, Daniel held on to hope. His shoulder still hurt, but his spirit carried a new strength. He was ready for the operation. The morning of the surgery arrived with soft clouds covering the sky. Daniel and Anna walked into the hospital together, their hands held tightly as if sharing strength. Daniel felt nervous, but he kept his steps steady. The nurse greeted him warmly at the reception and guided him to the pre-surgery ward. The ward was quiet, filled with patients waiting for their turn. Some were lying on beds with blankets over them, while others sat with worried family members beside them. Daniel was given a hospital gown and asked to change. As he slowly changed clothes, he felt the ache in his shoulder, but also the weight of everything that had led him here. Anna stayed close to him, helping him tie the gown and adjusting the blanket on his bed. "You will be fine," she whispered. "You are strong and you have good doctors now." Dr. Harris arrived a little later, his presence bringing comfort. He checked Daniel's file, spoke kindly, and explained the process once again. "You will be taken to the operating room soon. The surgery will take a few hours, but do not worry. We have a skilled team and we will take good care of you," he said with confidence. Daniel nodded, feeling reassured. "Thank you, doctor," he replied. As the nurses prepared him, Daniel closed his eyes for a moment and thought about the journey. Just days ago, he had been dismissed in a cold office, handed only a paper of tablets. Now he was surrounded by a team who listened and cared. The difference was clear, and it gave him courage. When the stretcher rolled him toward the operating room, Anna walked beside him until the doors where she had to stop. She bent close, kissed his forehead lightly, and said, "I will be waiting right here when you come out." Daniel smiled faintly, then was taken inside. The operating room was bright, filled with machines and doctors wearing masks. The anesthesiologist spoke gently to Daniel, asking him to relax. Within moments, his eyes grew heavy and everything faded into sleep. Hours passed. Outside, Anna waited anxiously in the waiting area. She prayed silently, her fingers interlocked as she thought of her husband. The ticking of the clock seemed louder than usual, each minute feeling like an hour. Nurses walked in and out, but she kept her eyes on the door, waiting for news. Finally, Dr. Harris stepped out with a tired but satisfied look. He walked toward Anna and smiled warmly. "The surgery went well," he said. "The growth has been removed successfully. Daniel will need some days of rest and therapy, but he is safe now." Anna's eyes filled with relief. She thanked the doctor again and again, her voice trembling with gratitude. Soon after, she was allowed to see her husband in the recovery room. Daniel lay on the bed, still weak from anesthesia. But when he opened his eyes slightly and saw Anna, a small smile appeared on his face. "You did it," Anna whispered, holding his hand gently. In the following days, Daniel stayed in the hospital for recovery. The nurses checked on him regularly, and doctors came to ensure everything was healing as planned. His shoulder was sore from surgery, but the sharp pain that had troubled him for weeks was already easing. With time, therapy would help him move freely again. But while Daniel healed physically, something else was happening in the hospital. News of his case spread further. Many staff members spoke quietly in corners, comparing how Dr. Miller had brushed him aside and how close Daniel had come to being sent home without help. They contrasted that with how Dr. Harris had taken him seriously and saved him from danger. Even patients began to hear parts of the story. Some looked at Daniel with respect when he walked slowly in the corridor for short recovery walks. A few even came to him and said, "We are glad you were strong enough to insist. It gives us courage too." Daniel listened humbly, never raising his voice, but inside he knew this was a chance for change. He had faced dismissal, but he had also found care, and now the difference between the two could no longer be hidden. One afternoon, while Anna helped him eat lunch, a senior nurse came quietly to his bedside. She looked serious but kind. "Daniel," she said softly, "many of us here know what happened to you. It was wrong and it should not have happened. If you ever decide to speak about it, we will support you. Patients deserve respect always." Daniel nodded, his heart touched by her words. He did not reply right away, but he knew she was right. His experience was not just his own. It was a reflection of something bigger, something that needed to be addressed. As his recovery days went by, Daniel grew stronger. Each small step he took in the hospital hallway reminded him that his pain had led to a truth that others needed to hear. Soon, when the time was right, he would reveal everything, and that truth would shake the hospital more than anyone expected. After a few days in the hospital, Daniel's strength began to return. The sharp pain in his shoulder was gone, replaced by a dull soreness that reminded him to move carefully. Each morning, he practiced small exercises suggested by the physical therapist, lifting his arms slowly and gently, feeling the improvement day by day. Anna stayed by his side, encouraging him and helping him stay positive. The hospital felt different to Daniel now. The corridors that once seemed cold and busy now felt like paths of change. Nurses and staff greeted him with polite smiles. Some spoke quietly to each other, aware of the story that had spread. Daniel noticed a few patients giving him encouraging nods as he walked slowly toward the therapy room. The experience had given him a sense of purpose beyond his own recovery. Dr. Harris visited him every day, checking on his progress and adjusting the therapy plan. He explained how well the surgery had gone and praised Daniel for following the exercises carefully. "You are healing faster than expected," Dr. Harris said one afternoon, "and your strength will return fully with patience and care." Daniel listened carefully, feeling grateful. He had been through fear and uncertainty, yet now he could see hope clearly. He remembered the first day he had been dismissed, the prescription given without a proper examination, and the cold expression of Dr. Miller. That memory made him realize how important it was for patients to be treated with respect and attention. One afternoon, while Daniel was resting after a therapy session, a small group of nurses approached him. They spoke quietly, making sure the conversation was private. "Daniel," one of them said, "we all know what happened. You were ignored and it was wrong. Many of us have been upset about it, but no one spoke out. You stood firm and now you are here, stronger than ever." Daniel looked at them calmly. He did not smile, but his eyes showed gratitude. "Thank you for saying that," he said softly. "It is not just about me. It is about everyone who comes here for help. Everyone deserves to be heard." The nurses nodded, clearly moved by his words. They shared their quiet promise to support change in the hospital. Even small gestures like listening more carefully and treating every patient with care could make a big difference. Daniel felt encouraged that his experience might inspire more kindness and fairness. Meanwhile, news of his case had quietly reached other doctors. Some were surprised that a patient with serious pain had been dismissed so easily. Others reflected on their own behavior and realized how important it was to pay attention to every patient. Daniel's story was becoming a quiet lesson for the hospital staff, even though no official report had been made yet. During therapy, Daniel began to talk more with other patients. Some had also experienced pain that was ignored or dismissed. He listened to their stories patiently, offering encouragement and reminding them to seek proper care. Many thanked him for his calm courage. Daniel understood that sharing his experience could give others the confidence to stand up for their own health. Anna continued to support him every step of the way. She helped him with exercises, brought him meals, and reminded him to rest when he overexerted himself. She also encouraged him to speak gently with the hospital staff, making sure his story was shared in a way that promoted awareness and positive change rather than anger or blame. By the end of the week, Daniel was able to lift his arm without sharp pain. He could walk more confidently through the corridors, and his presence began to inspire a quiet respect among those who had watched his journey. Even Dr. Miller could not ignore him. He noticed the difference in attention and care that Daniel now received, and a sense of unease settled over him. Daniel knew that the moment to reveal the full truth would come soon. It was not about punishment or blame. It was about fairness, respect, and ensuring that no patient would be dismissed because of assumptions or indifference. He had survived the pain, the fear, and the uncertainty. Now he was ready to take the next step. In the evenings, Daniel and Anna would sit quietly in the hospital garden. The soft light of the setting sun reflected on the trees, and the sound of birds made the atmosphere peaceful. Daniel often spoke about the future, about recovery, and about how he wanted his story to help others. Anna listened and encouraged him, knowing that he was determined to turn his experience into something meaningful. As the days passed, Daniel grew stronger, and the hospital staff watched closely. Some whispered about his courage, some reflected on their own actions, and others simply admired his patience. Daniel's journey was no longer just about his shoulder. It had become a symbol of truth, resilience, and the importance of listening to every patient with care. The day of his discharge finally arrived. Daniel walked slowly toward the exit with Anna beside him. The day after Daniel's discharge, he returned to his home feeling both relief and determination. His shoulder was still tender, but he could move it without the sharp pain that had troubled him for weeks. Anna helped him settle into his chair near the window, where sunlight warmed the room. She prepared a cup of tea and placed it beside him. Daniel held the cup carefully, thinking about everything that had happened. He remembered Dr. Miller's dismissive words, the careless prescription, and the feeling of being ignored. But he also remembered Dr. Harris, the specialist team, and the nurses who supported him. These memories filled him with both resolve and purpose. "I cannot forget how it felt," Daniel said quietly to Anna. "People came close to ignoring something serious. What if I had followed the first doctor's advice without question? I might not be here today in the same way." Anna nodded. "That is why your story must be heard," she said softly. "It is not just about you. Others need to know that they deserve care and attention no matter what. Daniel took a deep breath. He decided to start by talking with the hospital administration. If they knew what had happened, changes could be made to prevent it from happening to anyone else. The next morning, he and Anna returned to the hospital, carrying with them a quiet confidence. When they arrived, the receptionist guided them to the hospital director's office. The director, a calm man with kind eyes, welcomed them and asked them to sit. Daniel explained his experience carefully. He told the story from the first day, how he had been dismissed despite severe pain and how another doctor had discovered a serious condition. He spoke calmly without anger, focusing on the importance of proper care and attention for every patient. The director listened closely, taking notes. He asked questions politely, wanting to understand every detail. Daniel explained how Dr. Harris's careful attention had saved him from a worse situation, and how Dr. Miller's dismissive approach could have been dangerous. He also mentioned the observations of nurses and staff who had noticed the difference in treatment. The director nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you for sharing this, Daniel," he said. "It is very important that we hear from patients directly. Your experience will help us improve our hospital procedures. We cannot allow any patient to feel ignored or unsafe. I will review this case and make sure appropriate steps are taken to prevent it from happening again." Daniel felt a sense of relief. Speaking out was not easy, but he knew it was necessary. Anna held his hand, proud of his courage. They left the office quietly, but Daniel knew that his story would begin to make a difference within the hospital. In the following days, hospital staff began discussing the situation more openly. Dr. Miller noticed that people were quietly questioning his actions. Some of his colleagues approached him, not to blame, but to encourage reflection and learning. He realized that his dismissal of Daniel had been careless and unfair, and for the first time, he understood the real impact of his words. Daniel continued his recovery at home while sharing his story gently with anyone who would listen. Friends, family, and even acquaintances were inspired by his calm courage. He spoke about the importance of listening carefully, taking patients seriously, and speaking up when something feels wrong. Many thanked him, saying his story encouraged them to advocate for themselves in medical settings. Anna watched Daniel each day with admiration. She had seen his quiet strength from the beginning and now saw how he used it to make a positive change. "You turned your pain into a lesson for others," she said one evening. Daniel smiled softly. He knew the journey had been difficult, but the outcome was worth it. Back at the hospital, Dr. Harris continued his work with patients, gaining more respect from colleagues for his attention and care. Nurses shared Daniel's story as an example of the importance of careful observation and listening. The hospital began to implement small but meaningful changes, ensuring that patient complaints were always examined thoroughly, and that no one would be dismissed without proper evaluation. One afternoon, Daniel returned to the hospital for a follow-up checkup. As he walked through the corridors, several staff members smiled and nodded at him. Even Dr. Miller avoided eye contact at first, but later approached Daniel with a quiet expression of respect. Daniel accepted the nod calmly, understanding that acknowledgement of mistakes was an important step for change. After the appointment, Daniel and Anna left the hospital together. The sunlight was bright and the air felt fresh. Daniel looked at the building and felt a quiet satisfaction. The experience had been painful, but it had also brought understanding, awareness, and improvement. He realized that courage was not just about facing personal pain, but also about standing up for fairness and truth. Daniel's journey was far from over, but he knew he had made a difference. His story would remind everyone, patients, nurses, and doctors alike, that listening carefully and treating people with respect was the responsibility of every hospital staff member. And for Daniel, that knowledge gave him a new kind of strength, one that would guide him through recovery and beyond. A few weeks later, Daniel felt almost fully recovered. His shoulder had regained most of its strength, and the dull soreness from surgery had faded. Each morning he practiced his exercises diligently, gaining confidence with every movement. He could lift his arm, carry small items, and even begin gentle stretches without discomfort. Anna watched him with pride, knowing how far he had come. But Daniel's journey was no longer only about recovery. He knew that his experience had a purpose beyond himself. The story of being dismissed by one doctor and saved by another had created a quiet ripple in the hospital. Staff and patients alike had begun to notice, reflect, and speak about the importance of careful attention and fairness. Daniel wanted to ensure that the lessons he had learned would last. He decided to request a meeting with the hospital staff, including nurses, doctors, and administrators. With Anna's support, he prepared to share his story openly, calmly, and respectfully. He wanted the focus to be on awareness, improvement, and the value of listening to patients. On the day of the meeting, the conference room was filled with staff members. Some were curious, some slightly nervous, and some already aware of his case. Daniel stood at the front, his posture straight but relaxed. He began by thanking everyone for attending. "I want to share my experience," he said clearly. "It is about what happened when I first came to this hospital with severe shoulder pain. I was dismissed without proper examination. I received only tablets, and my condition could have worsened if I had followed that advice. Later, another doctor took my case seriously, ran proper tests, and discovered a serious problem. Thanks to careful attention and action, my condition was treated in time." The room was quiet. Staff members listened intently as Daniel continued. He spoke about his pain, the fear he felt, and how important it was to be heard. He emphasized that his story was not about blaming anyone, but about showing how crucial it is to treat every patient with respect, care, and diligence. "I am sharing this so that no patient ever feels ignored here," Daniel said. "Every person who walks through these doors deserves to be listened to, examined properly, and treated fairly. This is not about one doctor or one case. It is about creating a hospital where patients' needs come first, always." A senior nurse spoke next. "Daniel, your courage is remarkable. We all understand how your experience could have been dangerous. Thank you for standing firm and showing us how important it is to listen to every patient." Other staff members nodded in agreement, and a few even shared short stories of their own experiences, realizing the importance of careful attention. Even Dr. Miller was in the room. He remained quiet, but his expression showed reflection. After Daniel finished, Miller spoke softly. "Daniel, I want to acknowledge my mistake. I see now how important it is to listen, to examine carefully, and to never assume anything about a patient's pain. Your story has reminded me and all of us why we do this work." Daniel nodded calmly. He accepted the apology without words. The goal had never been revenge or punishment, but awareness and change. The room felt lighter, filled with understanding, and a shared commitment to better care. In the following weeks, the hospital implemented new procedures. Patients' complaints and pain reports were recorded carefully, follow-up checks were emphasized, and staff were encouraged to communicate clearly and respectfully. Daniel's story became an example used in staff meetings, teaching everyone about patience, empathy, and the importance of vigilance. At home, Daniel continued his therapy, regaining full mobility. Each day he felt stronger not only in body but in spirit. He had turned a frightening and painful experience into an opportunity to bring positive change. Anna remained by his side, proud of his courage and dedication. One afternoon, Daniel visited the hospital again, not for treatment, but to meet the staff. He walked through the corridors, greeted nurses, and exchanged kind words with doctors. The atmosphere felt different now. Respect, care, and attentiveness had become more visible, and Daniel could feel that his story had made a real impact. He paused for a moment and looked around, thinking of the journey from pain and dismissal to recovery and awareness. His shoulder was healed, but more importantly, his experience had helped create a hospital environment